Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Graban. Our guest today has a famous name, Jesse Jackson. It's, of course, not that Jesse Jackson, but the Jesse Jackson I'm happy who's joining us today is a veteran podcast host and interviewer whose work spans music journalism, genre television, and fan driven storytelling. He is the host of many podcasts. He's the creator and host of Set Lusting Bruce, a long running series exploring the global Bruce Springsteen community. He's the co-host of Perfectly Good podcast, an in-depth look at the songwriting and legacy of John Hyatt. And he's co-host of Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast. He's also a founding member of the JKL Media podcast, discussing a wide range of genre and pop culture discussions. So Jesse, thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
I am fine, as Sylvan, who is my co-host of John Hyatt podcast, said we will address Jesse's addiction to podcasting after we get to song Z in our John Hyatt from A to Z. Yes, and I'm thank you for mentioning the Reverend Jackson.
Yeah.
I wrote a blog piece from LinkedIn and Facebook about the blessings and the curse of having someone, after a famous name. Plus side, no one forgets your name.
Yeah.
If you're a short, fat white guy from the South and name Jesse Jackson, of like, hey, that doesn't look for it. So mostly it was a blessing. I did get to meet him for 1 minute once
Oh,
in Vegas, and there is a picture of Jesse meeting Jesse. The only downside is when someone makes a joke and they act like they're the first person that came at you. That is the only minor concern, but overall it was very good.
yeah. So, Reverend Jackson passed away, of course, very recently, and has a huge legacy in his life. You're in, that club of one other previous guest of mine, who's sort of in the well, not that one club. I interviewed a Stephen King,
Yeah.
not that Stephen King,
Yes.
and there's one other, at least, that I am blanking out on. So this happens more often than you'd think. There was I think an ESPN commercial. I don't know if you've seen it, where it shows people like, someone white guy like you or me walks up to the hostess of the restaurant. He's like, "Yeah, reservation for Michael Jordan." And the person at the restaurant looks deflated, like, "Oh."
Yes.
Series of kind of famous sports names. So I don't know if you've ever sensed like someone, that disappointment of like, oh, it's not the Reverend.
When my wife and I were engaged, she showed up at the tuck shop. We were gonna meet, and they were, "Oh, Jesse Jackson's coming here. Jesse Jackson's coming here." And
Yeah.
Linda's like, "Yeah, not that Jesse Jackson." So, yes, I often say I'm not the Jesse Jackson, I'm a Jesse Jackson. Yes, it is kind of fun.
Yeah. And that's going to continue again because,
Yes,
of his,
indeed.
his legacy. But well, I'm glad we could at least acknowledge him and that for a moment. So, I'm curious to hear, we've already had a great conversation. I'll mention first that I've been a guest on Jesse's podcast, Set Lusting Bruce, not to talk about Bruce Springsteen, who I like, but we talked about a band I love, Spinal Tap. So I think we'll come back.
Yes.
We'll talk about that later. Go ahead.
No, no, yes. One of the misconceptions, and I love the name of the podcast, Set Lusting Bruce, though someone said afterwards I should have named it Jackson Cage after another Bruce song.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I from the beginning, I've been doing this a little over 10 years, is I've always done what I call B-side episodes, episodes where someone joins me that wasn't necessarily passionate about Bruce or the E Street Band, but about a different musician or a different genre of music.
Hmm.
We can share and talk about that because, music is universal. And in so many different ways, that is how we celebrate. That's how we tell our stories. It's how we mourn. And so I just love capturing these stories from people sharing their experiences.
Yeah. We'll come back. We'll talk more about the podcast, and I'll put a link in the show notes. So it does make me even more curious than getting to the main question we start
Yeah.
with here, Jesse. What's your favorite mistake?
So one of the mistakes I go to often is the resistance to make changes. And what I mean by you start a new role, and I've done a lot of that. I'm a contact center leader. So I've gone to different call centers, everything from insurance sales to Christmas tree lighting, decorations to RV roadside assistance. And anytime you start a new company, you have ideas, and immediately the people that have been there before push back and say, "Oh, we tried that, but it didn't work."
Yeah.
Or, "No, that won't ever work here."
Mhm.
Or, "I'm not sure if that's a good idea." And the first time I started with, I had been with a company for a long time. And so I started with a new company, and I was really gun shy about, well, wow, maybe they're right. I mean, I'm new to this environment. I'm new to this culture. Um, Maybe I shouldn't step out of line. And I think that's a big mistake. You are going to make mistakes, but I think I love this story Harry Chapin told. The late great Harry Chapin, "Cats in the Cradle," his
Yeah.
biggest song, but a lot of other great music. And he said that he was talking to his grandfather one day, and his grandfather said, "There's two kinds of tired. There's tired when you fought someone else's fight,
Mhm.
you did someone else's dream, you worked on somebody else's goals, and at the end of the day, you are tired. And then there's others when you fought your fight, you fought your goals, you worked your ideas, and you might have even failed, but you at least have this sense of tired of, at least I'm working for what I believe in." And so since then, when I've moved to a new role, I've listened to the team, and I will, and I will hear why they think perhaps this isn't a good idea. But if I still feel like it's a good idea, I go, well, it may not have worked in the past. It may not work now, but we're sure going to give it a try.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's successful and sometimes it isn't.
Mhm.
So I think that is definitely a mistake that I recommend to people to not make. And I am by nature a collaborative leader, but it is sometimes, you got to listen to your gut and make that decision what you think is the best,
Mhm.
and then see what happens.
Yeah. Because, you think of that question of, do I speak up
Yes.
or do I hold it back? Whether you're a new employee, whether you've been somewhere for a while, I think, there's often this balance that we're weighing of like, what would be the benefit of speaking up to the company or to me? If I have a good idea, that's good for my reputation and I'm proving my value. Like, what's the benefit? Or then you think like, well, what's the potential risk? Like, I might
Yes.
get shot down, and that might be embarrassing. That might sting, or like, well, you're probably not going to get fired
Yeah.
for speaking up. But like, tell me, I'm curious to hear more about your thought process of like, when do you decide of like, yeah, let me if it seems like a risk, I'm going to go ahead and speak up versus you might decide to keep quiet. Like in that first time before you really know how that organization's culture and people respond.
Yeah. I was working for a company, and a new VP came in, and he was needing some stuff. He needed a someone to director of QA. And I really liked this guy. And I told him, I said, "Well, I don't know if I'd be any good at it, but if you need the help, I'm willing to take that role on." And 3 months later, I was laid off.
Uh,
Yeah. Um, and it really bothered me because I had said right from the start, "I'm not sure if I can do this." And he had said, "Oh, we'll figure it out together." But obviously we didn't, and I didn't understand his. You know,
just to clarify, do you think you got fired because of performance or was it just a broader company thing you got caught up there?
so he said it was performance. Um, I think part of it was I had done a really good job of getting the managers who worked for me ready to step up. And I think they said, oh, well, we can lose this level
Mm,
of management
yeah.
and they give these other people a chance to update. I do think that, I didn't understand what he wanted. And even though I kept trying to do it, and so it is one of my one of the lessons I learned is I am very careful about
Mhm.
volunteering for something that I don't know how to do.
Mm.
I will take a task if someone assigns me, but as far as taking a whole new role, I'm very careful about that now.
Well, and that's, I'd hate to hear a story where,
Yeah.
somebody does, to my judgment, the right thing,
Yeah.
and it turns out to be a mistake, whether that's
Yeah.
speaking up in a well-intended way or being a team player,
Yeah.
taking a role. And I think the way that plays out, I mean, I think it depends so much on culture. So
Yes.
you were making me think of, like, this idea of speaking up. I've been in, a lot of different hospital settings over the last 20 years as a consultant. And I think kind of the default culture, unless proven otherwise, unfortunately, is cultures that do tend to shoot down the new people who speak up, and they say the things, like you said, or they might even say quite literally, "Hey, you're new here. What do you know? You don't know how
Yes.
we do things." And I remember a couple of times. I remember one conversation. It was in a hospital laboratory, and people have learned a lot more about what they call traveling nurses in recent years. You're on contract gigs, and you move from city to city, hospital to hospital. And one of these traveler lab people, we were talking, and kind of lamented. He's like, I've worked in a lot of different places, and some places do things better than others. No one's perfect, but there's things to learn. And because I was in there kind of, engaging people on continuous improvement. And he shared with me, like, I wish they would listen to me. I think I bring some perspectives, and I think he had similarly been shot down and kind of learned, not to share those things. And, on the flip side, there are organizations that very specifically invite new people to say, hey, you are new here. You've got fresh eyes. We might not agree with it, but we want to hear what you say. I mean,
Yeah. One of my go-to statements, I'm a huge Aaron Sorkin fan.
would be,
And on sports night, Robert Guillaume was playing the leader. And he was talking to an employee who didn't wanna who wanted who was afraid standing out, not fitting in is how you lose your job. And he said, if you're dumb, you surround yourself with smart people.
Mhm.
If you're smart, you surround yourself with smart people who disagree with you.
Yeah.
And I bring that up anytime I start a new role. And I go, guys, I want you to push back.
Cool.
Um, but I'm not going to be afraid of trying something just because you guys don't agree with it.
Mhm.
Um, and so you have to sell the team on here's my idea, here's what we're going to do, here's why I'm trying to do it,
Yeah.
here's what I think is going to happen, and let's give it a try. And then, and then of course you have to figure out how to measure if you're successful or not.
Sure.
And then, and not be afraid to say, okay, we tried something and it didn't work.
Yeah.
Let's go back to home base and try to figure out where to go next.
I love all of that. I mean, that is so aligned with what I've learned and what I've experienced, to be good leadership, good culture. I'm going to plug my book for a minute, but in the mistakes that make us, a lot of these themes come up of leaders
Yeah.
who encourage this, and they invite dissent, they invite new ideas, and the effect of that, what we often call psychological safety, where people feel safe to speak up. And it doesn't mean you can't always get your way,
No.
but you can have your say without being considered, out of line. I think when you said that earlier, that jolted me, and I jotted that down. I mean, like, speaking up to disagree shouldn't be seen as insubordinate or disloyal the way some, I would say, weak leaders would react and frame that.
Yeah, I do think that too many people are afraid. So I want to give people an open avenue of form to say, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I'm doing. I do think that some of the best ideas have come from a team member, and we try it, we work through it. The other thing you have to build a culture of is, Mark, just because I don't take your advice doesn't mean I didn't listen to you,
And
right?
it doesn't mean you don't respect me fully.
And sometimes a person will feel that way.
Sure.
Like, "Oh, you don't care what I think." And then like, "No, just because it isn't mandatory or automatic if oh, I think we should do ABC, that we're gonna do ABC."
Yeah. And, psychological safety doesn't mean you never get pushback.
Right.
I mean, like, and I think in an environment where we can have, honest debate and discussion about different ideas, and then as you stated it so well, we don't really know until we go and try,
Yeah.
and really think of it as like an honest experiment, as opposed to like, oh, we're gonna quote unquote try it, but my intent is to prove that my idea was a good one, maybe driven more by ego than what's
Yeah.
good for the organization.
Absolutely.
The So, yeah, I mean, there's so much we're in alignment there, and
Yeah.
you sharing both sides of kind of being the new person to a team, and some of the things you've done as a leader,
Sure.
try to encourage that. So, I'd love to talk about podcasts, and
Sure.
we may talk about podcasting mistakes. I've made a bunch. Curious to hear your thoughts on the process and what you've done and learned along the way. But first off, I want to ask about set loose. I'm going to try to say it right. Set lusting Bruce. Sometimes it helps to slow down.
Yes.
Lusting Bruce. Why Bruce? Why that podcast? I see. For those who are just listening, I get the reference on the T-shirt. Tramps like us.
Yes.
Baby, we were born to run. Right.
Absolutely. This is a fan film that Dave Barry just put out that she talked about the people and their relationship with Bruce and his music and how much it's affected their lives. Yeah. So a couple things happened. One, Lynette Carolla, who was at the time married to Adam Carolla, was
Mhm.
doing an episode or two discussing Springsteen fandom with friends of hers and Adam's. And I really enjoyed those podcasts, and she stopped doing them. Then Springsteen and I came out, which is a film talking about Springsteen's music. The Tramps Like Us film is a much more professionally made film. Not that Springsteen and I wasn't a bad film, but Tramps Like Us is made by a documentary, and I love that. And so I got to thinking, I want more stories. And I checked, and there was not a Springsteen podcast at the time. So, in the spirit of lighting a candle versus cursing the darkness, I
Yeah.
decided to start one. And I knew
Yeah. Sorry.
September 2015.
Okay.
Yeah. And I knew what I wanted to do is to get people who were passionate about music and share why. Share how his music and other musicians' music has helped them with their lives. And so I've been lucky enough to have people that have had cancer, talking about Bruce helping them get through chemo, through deaths of spouses, siblings, parents, and joy, having Springsteen played at their wedding, raising, second generations, third generations, where I grew up listening to Bruce Springsteen's music. I can't remember a time where I didn't hear that music,
Yep.
right? And so over the years, I've been able to talk to people from around the world, all over the United States, and sharing those stories.
Yeah.
And there's some funny ones. There's some touching ones. I had a dad talk about his daughter was born premature, and he would play Bruce Springsteen music and read Harry Potter to her.
Mm.
And when she was at a book signing, they asked the girl, the young lady, she was like 8 or 9, "Were you disappointed you didn't get to talk to Bruce?" And he said, "No, he knows me. He wrote me all these songs."
Yeah.
There was a young man, Adam, that was in Australia, New Zealand, actually, that his mother was hit by a car when he was in her womb, was
Mm.
born, did not speak for the first 3 or 4 years of his life. And he was listening to the mom was listening to Bruce Springsteen in a car, and he started nodding his head to the music.
So-
And so she took him home and started playing Bruce music, and he learned to speak by watching Bruce Springsteen videos on caption. Those
Wow.
were his sight words. And so he learned, so Bruce literally gave him his voice. So, yeah, those are the kind of stories that you go, we just had someone, a friend had gone to England to go to a tour, ended up passing during the trip, and there were 6 or 7 of them fans that were all kind of in a WhatsApp chain, and they asked me if I would host a roundtable to talk about their friend Kim, and so we were able to talk about that. And then there's other ones where a guy he was at a Bruce, like, taping for some show, and he ended up catching Bruce and saying, "Hey, we're debating on having a second child. What do you think?" And Bruce kind of like, it's always a joy, but you also that's for the rest of your life. And so the guy went back and told his wife, "We can have another kid. The Bruce says it's okay."
You hear what you want to hear. So,
Exactly.
I was going to ask, have you tried to arrange an opportunity to meet Bruce?
So I was able to go to a book signing in Austin, and I got my 30 seconds with him.
Oh,
Yeah, no, I have reached out to friends of friends, but I have not been able to get to that inner circle to
yeah.
say, "Hey, I've been doing this over 1,500 episodes over 10 years. Can Bruce give me 30 minutes?" But, I'm hanging in there anyway.
I mean, it's a mistake not to ask. I mean, at some point, like, I'm just thinking of a time like as a host after it was a couple of years ago, William Shatner went up in the Blue Origin
Yeah.
spacecraft, was up in space, and incredibly impactful on him, of course. And I forget the exact comment, but he in his reflections on going up there on that relatively short voyage, something about mistakes, something about learning, and something, and I thought, oh wow, and really resonated. It was in the theme with this podcast, so I went to his website and put in a request.
Yeah.
There was a form on William Shatner's website, and it didn't work out, but I got a kind response from somebody on his team saying, well, thank you, Mr. Shatner. Really appreciates the invitation, but just because of time, he only does a podcast if it's for a friend, or this was funny, or if it's contractually obligated
Yeah. That's
um,
funny.
in some project. But I thought, like, okay, fair enough. Like, that was much nicer than them just, hitting delete on the request. Cause I realized there's a lot of requests, but, in that spirit of you miss all the shots you don't take,
Absolutely.
it didn't take me that long to try to craft a pitch.
Yes.
Um,
So
so
if anyone has a connection to Bruce Springsteen's inner
yeah.
circle, help a brother out. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if this will help exactly with this, but I am going to connect you. I had already told Jesse, another recent guest here. I'm going to hold up Andy Freed's book, Lead Like the Boss. If you haven't heard that episode, go check that out. I'll link to that episode in the show notes. So I don't think, he's not like personal friends
Yeah.
with Bruce, but he got permission to write a book about leadership lessons from Bruce's approach. So I'll connect you to Andy, and I think he'd be a great guest on your pod.
That sounds beautiful. I am going to buy that book. Yes, because management, the boss, what's not to love?
I asked Andy. I'd just be curious to get some of the rundown about favorite album
Mhm.
Bruce's.
So I That's always an interesting question. I love Tunnel of Love. I am a big fan of Letter to You, which was his latest studio album. I think too many people, Bruce fans, tend to be snobby about Born in USA,
Uh-huh.
but I think that was the gateway album for a lot of fans in the world.
Yeah, that's when I learned about him. I was a kid
Uh,
when that came out in 1984.
yeah, The Rising certainly has a place in its heart, about 9/11, and Wrecking Ball, a song that he wrote a lot about with the banking crisis that happened.
Mhm.
Um, I Land of Hope and Dreams is my favorite song. The new tour he is starting with in this spring. Um, I already have 2 tickets. I have a ticket for Atlanta and I have a ticket for Austin.
Oh, great.
Um, but Land of Hope and Dreams, No Kings tour is this
Mhm.
latest little tour.
Yeah.
And I love the song Better Days. I recommend strongly. Better Days is all about living your life now.
Mhm.
And too many people wait for, well, when I get the kid out of diapers, then I'll be okay. When I get the promotion, then I'll be okay. And versus enjoying the journey. And then my third song is whatever's playing at the time. All right.
Just happy to have any Bruce going on.
Yes.
I'm looking at the discography on Wikipedia, and you see this arc. Born to Run was huge. I think that's what Andy said was his favorite album because he was, that's what made him a fan. But you're going through and look and see, well, Born in the USA was 17 times platinum.
Yes.
And then Tunnel of Love that came out 3 years later, and I remember the song Tunnel of Love, that was 3 times platinum, and some people might look and like, "Oh, well, that was a letdown, it bombed compared to the previous album," but, I imagine, Bruce, even at that point was at a point where it's like he can make the music he wants to make and not worry about the sales numbers.
Yeah. So there was a film that just came out this last fall, Deliver Me from Nowhere.
Mhm. I was
I was
gonna
luck
yeah.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to get Warren Zanes, who the movie was based on his book, Deliver Me from Nowhere: The Making of Nebraska.
Mhm.
And the book basically asks the question why, after The River, which was his first true commercial success, Hungry
Mhm.
Heart got on the radio, and then he did Nebraska, and then he did Born in USA. Why did he have to do this small, intimate album?
Congrats. Yeah.
And it's an interesting thought. There is some that believe that after Born in the USA, Bruce felt like it was going out of control. He
Mhm.
had certainly seen how fame had hurt Elvis, and so maybe that was a specific, kind of wanting to do something. I know when they went to tour Tunnel of Love, they changed where everyone stood on stage to kinda send a message, this isn't the same E Street Band.
Mm.
So, yeah, I think one of the things that I've been really bad at is if you don't manage your career manages you.
Mhm.
So, I think he has managed his career a certain way. One of my favorite questions I have is, Michael Jackson's Off the Wall
Mhm.
was an incredibly successful album
Yeah.
filled with great songs, critically acclaimed, and I just can imagine that the studio were going, "Well, we can't beat this.
Lord.
If we can just do Close, we're gonna be happy," and he does Thriller, which is brought it to a different level.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that Bruce has reached the point where he does what he wants to do and makes the music he feels like making. The late night host had a great time that he put out the Streets of Minneapolis and he posted like, I wrote it this weekend, I recorded it yesterday, I'm putting it out today. And, like one of the hosts said, well, hey, I had a pretty productive weekend too. I washed a load of clothes. I put them in the dryer. So basically, you and I, the
Yeah.
same thing, Bruce.
Yeah. And, between, the state, the place he's at in life in terms of, not having to answer to anybody other than really himself and his own conscience and what he wants to do. And, in his early 70s, sometimes, people say like, look, I don't have any more F's to give. And, he can put that song out there. And then I think it's funny when some people say like, I wish Bruce Springsteen, oh, he suddenly got all political. Well, you don't know Bruce Springsteen's career, right?
Well, and we always laugh at the people who play Born in USA, and it is a patriotic song, but it is not the kind of patriotic song that many people think it is.
It's not all just rah, 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 everything's
Yes.
awesome. It's I mean, you're the expert here. Tell everyone about the song and really what.
Yeah, so, he was asked to do a song for a film, and he read the script, and he ended up writing Born in USA that wasn't used in the movie, and, this is all about a Vietnam vet
Mhm,
trying to figure out what to do after Vietnam and how to fit in. And but the idea is, but at least he knows I have that I was born in the USA to hang on to. It's an absolutely beautiful song. A few years ago, Bruce wrote The Wall, which is all about a veteran talking about the Vietnam Memorial
mhm.
wall, which if you've ever gone to DC,
Yep.
it is absolutely inspiring is the wrong word, but it is just so moving to see how many people died in that war.
Mhm.
And, I was lucky enough at one show, he did Born in USA and then The Wall. Can't remember which order. And that was just really beautiful to see him. He has worked very hard with the Vietnam Veterans Associations. And if you ever get a chance to watch Bruce Springsteen on Broadway, which is available on Netflix, he tells the story of going to draft board and them not picking him
Mhm.
because he had had an accident. And before he played a blues version of Born in the USA, he says, I do often wonder who went in my place.
Mhm. And what happened?
Yeah, exactly.
Gosh. I'll have to check that out for
Yeah.
sure. So yeah, thank you for the recommendation on that. So let's cover a few other topics before we wrap up. It comes to podcasting mistakes. I'll go first. I think it's a good
Okay.
example,
Sure.
like or a good, good opportunity to lead by example. I've done, let's see, 500. I've probably done like 1,000
Yeah.
interviews across different podcast series. Guess how many times I forgot to hit record?
Raising my hand. We've all done that.
I've done it twice.
Yeah. I just did it last year. So I've
Yeah,
been doing this thing for at the time, like over 9 years,
yeah.
and I forgot to hit record. The other mistake I make is I am so paranoid, Mark, of running out of episodes.
Mhm.
I will record plenty in the bank and I will find myself, oh my goodness, I have 2 dozen episodes in the bank and I only put out
Yeah.
an episode this year. I'm only doing one a week, but used to I do two a week. And I talked to you in March. I'm not going to release it till
Mhm.
June,
I
right?
hate
Like
having
that's so you have to find that fine line where you always want a little buffer, but
yeah,
also not in the there.
yeah, I've made that same mistake where earlier in this series, sometimes it would be many, many months.
Yeah.
One thing I've done, I'll share is that in my podcast scheduling tool, I think it doesn't allow me to record more than 2 in a week,
Yes.
which helps limit. And there are some weeks where my schedule doesn't allow me
Right.
to record, and my scheduling tool doesn't let me do more than 1 a day. Because
Yeah.
back in pandemic times, and I was home more, and I had more free time. I was sometimes doing 3 recordings a day, and it's almost better to have someone wait a little bit for the recording date, and then the quicker turnaround. And if someone's got a book coming out next month, I'll make things run a little bit quicker to help with that.
Yeah, and I will make that change too, but yeah, because I get so eager
Yeah.
that I don't want to make this difficult to because they're doing a favor, right? Joining me on the podcast is a
Mhm.
favor.
Right.
And so I feel guilty like, well, God, the first time you have open is May, Jesse. And I'm like, yeah, well, okay, let me see if I can fit you in right before. And so what I try to do is I set that same thing. I'm taking a vacation in March. I'm doing this. So let's try to go. And then I always do the same thing. If there is something specific going on, for example, if you have a book that's being published on April 6th,
Yeah.
let's get you in so I can make sure that the episode comes out with that.
Yeah. Yeah. We can have a system and work around
Yes.
them if need be. I'm thinking of, like, mistakes during an episode. Like I try really hard to not mispronounce anyone's name. I didn't have to check. And I talked to you before, Jesse Jackson
Yeah.
is easy, but like to not take for granted that I know how to say a name, just to always ask.
Yeah.
And I think I've avoided there are some names I've stumbled over, which I think doing as well. But I'm thinking you're making me think of one episode. So I've been really fortunate to have two active members of Congress of the House of Representatives on the show. Will Hurd, who's no longer in the House, he was the guest in episode 2, and he told this really great, vulnerable story about how he lost his first primary runoff because he didn't listen to his consultants he had hired. And, he got the most votes in the first one, but in Texas, he didn't have 50%, and he lost the runoff. But then he learned from that and ran again 4 years later, and he listened to his consultants, and he won re-election a couple of times. Then a couple of years later, had Adam Smith, who is still in the House from the state of Washington, and he was telling a story, and I was a little nervous. I'm talking to a congressman. He's got the same home office background that he has when he's on a news channel, and I'm just a little amped up, like not wanting to make a mistake with the congressman. And he was telling a story about a campaign and something went wrong. And I don't know if I misunderstood. I'd like to think I was listening well, but I said something about like, oh, so then when you lost, and he was like, no, 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 I won.
Yeah.
Oh, what? Whoops. At least he corrected me. I mean,
Yeah.
he wasn't mean about it or anything. Oh, that was a bit of a stumble, but hey, maybe it was unclear to the listener. Well, I did go back and review it. And I'm like, he didn't tell it in the clearest.
One of the things I've started doing is I end every podcast with the same question. It's called the Mary question. And so I had found myself that sometimes the guests, especially a non-Springsteen guest, is not familiar with the song Thunder Road. So I've now started when I send the reminder, I'll go and oh, by the way, please remember to listen to Bruce Springsteen's Thunder Road and be ready to give your opinion on if you think Mary gets in a car. I still had one. I had a couple weeks ago someone that said, "Oh crap, I didn't see that email. I don't know that song." I'm like, "Okay, we're going to mark you incomplete on the assignment and we move on." Right?
Well, I remember when I was a guest on your show, you did send that in advance. And like I knew the song, but I don't really know it. So I did go back and listen to it and
Yes.
wanted to draw my own conclusion as opposed to, you Google the song and it starts bringing up this debate. I'm like, I wanted to draw my own conclusion from the art. But I mean, do you do that check in like before you start recording now to make sure?
No, that's a
Okay.
really good example. I should
Well,
say, "Hey, by the way, did you listen to Thunder
yeah.
Road?" That's a good idea. The other thing I do is I try to do different things. I'll come up with new themes and new ideas just to keep it fresh.
Like new segments or just
Yeah,
something
new
new.
seg you're doing, right. Um, I I also one of the th I've told the story so many times, but I had someone on very early in the podcast. It was a decent interview. It wasn't great, but it was good, and, I thanked him, and I quit the recording, and I said, "Hey, I appreciate it," and the person said, "Oh, I had such a great time. Next time I'm on, I'll tell you about when I got drunk with the E Street Band."
What? Like, why did you bring that up now?
Yes, that you're kind of burying the lead. So I do a couple things. One, I don't stop recording till they hang up,
Oh,
just
yeah,
in
and
case.
that's great because sometimes I've had a guest say something that was just gold that would have made a great clip to promote the episode.
Yes. And the
Cool.
other thing is I often ask, okay, so Mark, is there anything I should have asked you that I
Yeah.
haven't? So that they can, oh yeah, there is a story I wanted to
Yeah.
tell, or there's something we could do.
Well,
Yes.
and this is a me problem, but I've had guests or hosts ask that, and there are
Yeah.
times I have just froze. I'm like,
Yeah.
can't think of I can't think of anything. So I
And
guess
that's a perfectly fine answer. But it is, they'll come up and they'll say, oh, well, yeah, you didn't ask me this. I'm like, okay, and we'll go off on another thing. I don't think I made the mistake very often of not embracing tangents. I think, and I respect people that have a tight podcast. They get it in 25, 30 minutes. It's in, it's out. It is a streamlined podcast. I tend to not be afraid of going on tangents.
Yeah.
And like today, we're talking. We end up talking about the Springsteen movie, right? And I enjoy that. Um, and I will sometimes cut out. I got complaint very early in it that somebody gave a iTunes review saying that they gave me a 1 star because I told too many of the same stories and I should do a FAQ. And that really bothered me, of course, right? That we all take that personal. And so sometimes I will say, I may cut this out, but the person I'm having a conversation with
Mhm.
doesn't know that story.
Yeah, and it's hard. Like, if somebody has listened actively to every single episode versus you can't assume that's the case. I've told a couple of stories many times. Because the conversations on the show tend to trigger certain memories and
Yes.
couples. But like I try I aim for 40 minutes. Like we're recording. I've got a hard stop in 5 or 6 minutes just
Yeah.
schedule wise. But I think the beauty of the podcast format is that if someone's listening, they can listen to it as long as they want. I don't know how many people listen to the favorite mistake story and then stop the
Yeah.
episode, or there's people who are still listening now, and thank you for doing so.
If you are, yeah, absolutely. The other thing is that we kind of joke with it, take a drink, with the drinking pod, like
Mm,
there's the drinking games.
yeah.
And so on John Hyatt, my perfectly good podcast, we now say anytime I tell a Bruce story, Sylvan goes, take a drink, you know?
All right. So maybe one other question before we wrap up,
Sure.
and I'll encourage people. We did actually, well, we did an episode where I was a guest talking about Spinal Tap, the band, the movie,
Yes.
now movies with the sequel, and then you kindly invited me to come back, sort of be a third wheel.
That was a
Remember?
fun episode.
Yeah, about the guy that was doing the charity project of bands that were doing cover versions of Spinal Tap songs.
Yes.
A great project. But one thing I love about Spinal Tap, the original movie, is that a lot of the humor is mistakes that
Yes.
characters are making, not filmmaking mistakes, but like
Right.
just, getting lost backstage and showing up to the record signing at the record store where there's no fans there.
Yeah.
Well, different people make different mistakes or bad assumptions. And, in this case, there's humor in it. What are some of your favorite things about, the Spinal Tap?
Yeah, I love everyone 11. That
Close to
has become
11.
part of our culture.
Yeah.
The whole idea of their journey of how they're getting smaller and smaller venues,
Yeah.
the to scale, the little,
The Stonehenge.
Stonehenge coming
That was
out.
the famous mistake.
Yeah. I love that these actors embraced the character and enjoyed that. The famous story, Mark Knopfler said that he would do the soundtrack to Princess Bride if they would have the cap that Rob Reiner wore
Yeah.
the filmmaker, and you'll see it on Fred Savage's, room, that cat.
Yeah. We're on Easter egg.
It is just so beautiful, and the music's actually pretty decent. I mean,
They all play their instruments. Michael McKean and Harry Shearer and Christopher Guest. That's one thing that I think is really amazing. They're not lip syncing.
yeah,
They are writing and performing music.
absolutely.
And just thinking of the sadness of Rob Reiner, and this is a bad, less funny note to end on. Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle being
Yeah.
murdered. That was only maybe about 2 months after after I was on your show. I had an opportunity to go to LA and attend like the public premiere of the Spinal Tap sequel, and I didn't get to meet Rob Reiner or anybody from the band, but they did a live Q&A.
Yeah.
And in the Grauman's Chinese theater in LA that was, like, live streamed to theaters around the country and probably other countries. So yeah, it's, people have a strong sense of connection, whether it's to Bruce or to Spinal Tap. One of my best friends through my life is the guy that introduced me to a bootleg VHS copy of This Is Spinal Tap, and probably recorded off of HBO. And
Yeah.
we watched that in high school, and he went with me to LA to that show. So hi Don. He's actually the artist who did the artwork for the podcast cover and for the cover of my book, The Mistakes That Make Us. So
Nice.
maybe there's a happier note to end on, right? Whether it's a musician like Bruce or a movie, it really does create special bonding opportunities. Well, I'll give you the last word on that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that this podcast create communities.
Mhm.
You get listeners, they understand the private in jokes and the thoughts. And following a band creates a community. And so I really do want to ask anyone who's listening, if you're passionate about any musician, band, music genre, setlistingbruce@gmail.com. Send me an email. We'll set up a time and we'll just let you talk about your fandom. And you don't have to have done anything crazy. You haven't had to see, 30 or more shows. In fact, one of the statements I make often is the amount of times you've seen a band perform live is not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are.
Right.
And so yeah, I just am always looking for guests to join me and to share their story.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jesse. I'm going to make sure there are links in the show notes to Set Lusting Bruce, your other podcasts. I hope people will check those out. So again, thank you so much. Great to talk to you again. Glad we could do it here on my show.
Well, I absolutely loved you joining me. We're going to do it again sometime. And thank you for, it's always fun when you're a guest on a podcast because you don't have to do any pre-show work. You just show up and
Or post show.
exactly. Thank you,
Right.
my friend. You have a great spring and hopefully we'll meet in person soon.
Hope so. Thanks.